So thank you again, Craig, for that wonderful talk. For our discussion now, we've got a good amount of time. I guess by our schedule, I would suggest going to 11:20 rather than 11:25. We go to 11:20 to give enough time for closing, but of course, we can be flexible in that as well. So just for our discussion, I just ask everyone to perhaps bow in so everyone knows you are about to share. And when you're done, bow back out. And if mostly we could try to remain muted perhaps when we're not speaking to help limit background noise and share thoughts on the topics presented by Craig, just based on what you heard, what you learned, how it relates to your own practice and your own experience. So thank you. Jeff, bowing out.
John Banyan. I think most of you know me. But I'm John from the Texas Sangha. I think we gathered here to have a chance to practice our Dharma teaching. For me, I'm thinking more in a term of propagating the Dharma other than teaching the Dharma. So share some of my experience. I think to effectively propagating the Dharma, the first thing you need to understand is your audience, the level of your audience. So I've been involved during the Sunday service at my temple, and after the service, we normally have lunch serving people attending. So we just sit down with people. Some you know, some you don't know, some new, and during the lunch we talk, and I use that opportunity to listen. And whoever wants to learn more about the Dharma, then that's the perfect chance for us to propagate the Dharma. So what I used to do is I throw out some probing question first to see what kind of level, your whoever your target audience is at. I said, have you ever heard about like Four Noble Truths, or have you heard about like the eight noble path, or the dependent origination, and depends on what kind of scripture books have you written. So depend on their answer, you kind of gauge their level where they are at in their practice, and kind of tune your conversations to their level, so that they understand it better. So funny thing is that there's one volunteer just like me. He's been there for many years at the temple. His practice is really I can tell that he's really deep and he really understands. But the way he talk like mostly at you can see like really abstract level of emptiness. So during my conversation with him, he said, "You talk like that, nobody can understand." So then I kind of explained back to the people around that what he's talking about. He's like way up there, so you don't really need to try to understand. So I think that is one of the way that we can effectively spread in the Dharma. sprinkle words, sprinkle seeds out there to the level that people can understand. And once they get it, they're going to want to come back to learn more. So you get more opportunity to explain. For us here, we have gone through the several years of studying. So I think it's okay to be prepared. So this is the chance for us to practice ourselves to be comfortable with delivering a speech. And then when the real thing is when you go out there, meet people out there, and be able to propagate the Dharma effectively, jumping out.
Sandra Valian, also from the Chatty Texas group. So Craig, I think I remember years ago somewhere where we were together, you saying something to the effect of you're an introvert and maybe speaking in front of people was something that you were not crazy about or that brought you some hesitation anyway. I could be wrong. I'm old and I forget a lot of stuff, but I thought it was you that shared that. And I want to say that, my goodness, that certainly does not show through with your teaching. I thought your talk was abundant in not just right view, but so many other teachings from different sources. And I like the way that you include from the matrix to the discourses and a lot of suttas, as well as some modern texts that are relevant to our practice. I would, and this is my only critique, you are obviously more high-brained than I am, and you use the word meta, and for not with the one T, not the two T's, and so my slow brain is going, wait, is it the Buddhist meta or back to the scientific use, I guess? But I see that more as a weakness in me than in your talk. But maybe, as John recommends, considering your audience and me on a much lower scale, for the choice of words like that could be ambiguous somewhat. I just have to catch up. That's all that happens when I hear it first. But thank you so much for a wonderful talk. Bowing out.
Thank you, Sandra. You're welcome. Yeah, actually, I realize that now, and I've done, have one signed with meta a couple of times. I've signed it, written it the wrong way there also. But yeah, so meta as a view, an abstraction up from from what you're talking about. I probably am the one that you're remembering as being hesitant to speak in front of other people. I mean, I'm not necessarily hesitant, but I have like physiological reactions where my IQ drops several points, and it's just like I stumble and I forget what I was going to say, and a number of that is just age-related forgetfulness. But when you're got the perfect thing to say and suddenly there's just like a hole in your mind, it's like, what do you do now? And that actually is an exercise or a practice in itself. I mean, we're all, we're on, an inexorable path to, being old, and it's nothing to be ashamed about, but it is something that one is ashamed about anyway. I mean, it reveals a vulnerability that you don't want to do. When I had the curious thing of I peaked in terms of like my social abilities in terms of how to interact with people when I was 12 years old, and it's been downhill since then. But I can remember just like being in 5th grade, and I was I don't know if I was cocky, but I had, I mean, people liked me. And I can remember people gathering around and me making up stories extemporaneously. And people were fascinated by these stories. And I can remember just like everything, like, like 10 seconds in front of me, stuff was unfolding in my mind. And then I'd tell the story. And it was really, really cool. But I can't do that anymore. But anyway, it is a process working with what I've got. The other big thing is I mean, maybe what happened is I just became more self-conscious as I hit my teens. That probably is it. But the the Gotha that I read about one who bows and the one who's bowed to, I'm looking up because I'm reading it. Therefore, the communication between those is inexpressibly perfect, is really, really powerful. I mean, when you drop the self out, you're viewing correctly then, and then all of that stuff is, maybe still there, but it's irrelevant and it doesn't affect you. So that's what I'm aiming for. Long way to go, but thank you.
And sorry, I'm not trying to pour it all the time, but in response to what you said, there was one other thing I wanted to comment on, and I'm not so sure if it was where you were perhaps having some forgetful moment or whatever, but you had some really well-placed pauses. And that allowed, for me at least, to kind of catch up to you, because like I said, you had so much information that, and I thought that was intentional and artfully placed, regardless of whether or not it was. But thank you.
As part of our effort here, I mean, I was recently, I mean, when we started doing this, I was trying to gather up resources on how to give a Dharma talk, and there's not a whole lot out there. I mean, it's not necessarily that different from any type of public speaking, but there are some differences. But I came across a really interesting talk, which is there's on our website. There's a link with some of the initial resources that I found out there. So it is pointed to on the DTO website. But it was an MIT professor, and now I don't remember the name of it. But he was like a computer scientist, AI type of guy. But he was really effective at speaking, and he had basically, it's like How to Talk was I think the name of the talk. And he gave this an annual talk like for 30 years and was just incredibly popular. So this is a recording of him doing, like, one of his last ones was like in 2017. But he said, don't be afraid to pause, because it does exactly what you said. It gives people a chance to catch up, and we tend to, especially if we're nervous, we tend to rush because we've got all of this stuff. It manifested in me where I don't know what to say, and then suddenly everything crystallizes and I blurt. And that's really not an effective way to communicate. I mean, it works, it gets it out, but it's not an effective way to get it out. So it was mostly intentional doing that. Also, I lost my place a couple of times, so that was that too.
Heather bowing in. Craig, I'm so grateful to have heard this talk, and I'm so glad I got to hear it, because I misconstrued the time we were beginning and thought it was 10 and came in very late. I'd just like to respond to your request for comments for what people heard and remembered from your talk. And I never hear you speak without being amazed at how widely read you are with Buddhist literature. And I just feel honored to be in the presence of that. And I'm so far behind. So my ability to grasp what you say, all the things you said was limited. But I loved how you started with the idea that right view in some ways is both the beginning and the end of the Eight Noble Truths. And that made your talk so appropriate for the first one in our series, because it frames, I meant the path, I didn't mean the truths, the path. It framed that for us. And I love contemplating that. I also loved your explanation of why it's so hard, why right view is so difficult for us, and why it doesn't come naturally. And I love the fact that you drew in so many other Dharma principles to show how they interrelate with right view. And I loved the places where you related it to things that are not, that are either modern or not from Buddhism, like the Alexander Pope poem and the quote you read from The Novelist. I mean, they were such great additions and reminders that, what we learn, we can find everywhere, and that the truth of Buddhism pervades pretty much, all sources of wisdom, and we can find it anywhere. So that was my little remembrance of what you spoke. The one thing that I would like to hear, and I know, and I mean, this isn't just about your presentation, but presentations in generally, is that I think people are reluctant to share their own experience for fear that there's hubris in it, or that it's not as important as other offerings that you can include. But so often, to me, the humanistic element of how it is applied, by a practitioner is so meaningful. And I think if there was one thing that I might have liked to have heard from you is, could you remember a circumstance in which you worked through those elements that you presented about how to discern right view and how to apply it, and just a real life situation in which it came up for you, and maybe you struggled with it, and maybe you felt that you successfully discerned right view, or maybe you didn't. But I think I might like, and it would have helped me to know you better. So I think I might have liked to have heard that from you. So thank you for listening, and thank you for your presentation.
I think you just saw me struggling with right view as I was trying to make my thoughts coherent. And thank you for your generous words. I mean, I don't know if I warrant them, but Buddhism is so deep that you start to dig in, and so many different traditions, and it's just this 64,000 or no 65 was it 84,000 Dharma gates. I was thinking the $64,000 question. I mean, there are just so many schools of thought, and to you get a little bit of this and saying, well, how does that relate to this? And you wind up, can be overwhelming at times, and as a result, it's easy to kind of get to the point of imposter syndrome. So, but anyway, thank you. I mean, everybody has this wisdom within them, and whether or not you can put words on it or concepts on it isn't really the point, because they're just pointing back to this non-conceptual thing that we're all, that we all have to begin with. So anyway, the struggling with right view is, as I'm speaking, I'm blanking and being nervous and everything else, but then just realizing that this doesn't matter, and it does matter, but my how I feel about myself is a distraction and not at all relevant. So that's empty. We're all here together, and this is wonderful. So there's, the aimlessness comes in there, where, it is perfect as it is. I forget all of the others now that we've gone over them, but that was it applies in every moment of your life. It is how you live your life. Sometimes you're aware of that, and sometimes you're not. So right now, I am acutely aware of it. Thank you.
Maeve bowing in. Thank you so much for the talk. I really enjoyed it. And I also always enjoy when you speak. You always have this, you do have this sort of like way of being precise, but at the same time, sort of like warm, which isn't always the case. Like being able to call a lot of things, but there's a warmth in you that is really beautiful and something that is such a connection. And every time I hear you speak, I look forward to your perspective, all the time, because it's always sort of like beautifully observed. And so thank you for that, really. And I remember, years ago when we were first starting in this particular Dharma class, and although I had read many books and been studying and all these things, I hadn't had to put myself out there very much, and then all of a sudden we had to do one of our book reports. And of course, the book I get is the Tao Te Ching by myself. I had never read, I'm trying to, how can you capture the Tao Te Ching for the very first time in front of this, you're like, it's like people study this, their whole lives. And so, I was very nervous. I had 3 small children at home, and we had some scholars in the class at that time who were actually Sanskrit scholars. And so it was speaking about imposter syndrome or feeling teeny tiny, what am I going to do? And so I did I read it, I did the best I could. I focused on one component of Wu Wei, which is still with me to this day. I try to study it so much. But what was really funny is I gave everybody these handouts, and in the handout, that instead of spelling T-A-O or D-A-O, right, I auto-corrected it because I spelt it wrong incorrectly to T-O-A, TOA, which is actually a bionicle figure that my kids and so I start to sort of read my notes, and I'm like speaking of pausing and losing your place and not feeling worthy. And so I was sort of it was those moments, do I continue? Am I even at this level? Can I keep going? But what I learned is worst one, first one, it's from there, it's really been uphill, it's no matter what I do, it's always better than that first experience. And I also feel that, and I have noticed this in the Dharma teacher order, and I don't mean this as a criticism, I mean it as just the way that we're young and we're still evolving, the way that we are together and how we interact together and how we go about that has always been very much in this very formalized way. And Buddhism is in that very formalized way. And something that I have felt that has been missing, not in your talk, but in all talks really in general, has been that personalized component, that willingness to be raw or vulnerable with the group, in the sharing of something that is meaningful, because it is true. It's when we're even one component of the Eightfold Path is so complex. It's simple and it's complex, as you pointed out in your talk. It's everything, it's nothing. It's it's scholarly and it's sort of everyday, whatever, it's everything at once. And I feel that, what I have learned over the years, and this is just for me, is that it's I've had to shift it from sort of intellectual knowledge to include the intellectual knowledge, but also to have a relationship to it. It's because where are we going with it? Are we going to be, scholars of the, Buddhism across the country or in universities? I mean, maybe some people are, but really we are trying to love it and to apply it to our lives and to understand how like these like pieces of it speak to us and manifest themselves in our everyday life. That's it. You know, whether we go to become a teacher or you're becoming a priest or you're not doing anything or you're moving on or you're formalized in religion or you're just stepping in or you're part of a Sangha, you're not part of a Sangha. It's really about our relationship to the Dharma, which is our relationship to life, every aspect of life. You know, and I think that that's in not just in this talk, but on all the talks that I've heard, is that sense of like risk, personal risk and vulnerability, which has been really a beautiful thing in outside talks for me. And in some of the, you mentioned a podcast for Jack Cornfield, who always has that sort of like, come on in, like sort of like beautiful way of wrapping the Dharma around you through stories and personal humor and experience. You know, like, I'm not saying that I would aspire, I will never be there, but it's a beautiful thing. And he does it so easily, you know, and I always admire it, you know, it's like he just pulls a story out, gives it, you know, and you're like, wow, that really meant something to me, you know. So anyway, Maeve bowing out.
John Banyan again. This time probably about the contents of the presentation. Craig, you accidentally exposed your whole deck, so that shows me that you have done a whole lot of work to prepare for this speech, and that's great. One of the things I liked your presentation is that you cited like verses, poems that are, you know, familiar with general Americans, so that you can relate what you said through those that, you know, people are familiar with, then they can kind of get on easily with that idea. Through our 4 years of studying in the DTO, I think we have covered most of this material, but just going through once, we easily to forget. So some of the point you pull out, like the 3 Dharma seals, the 3 doors of liberation. I think that if we revisit the book we studied back then, I think I take kind the hearts of the Buddha teachings, all of them are in there. So sometimes we need to go back and review. The Eightfold Path we also studied through a book. I think the name change is like Visions and Transformation. When you go back and read those, probably we'll have a clearer understanding now that we have gone through, you know, all the 4 year that we're learning. But if you look in there, right view, there are many levels, many stages that you achieve through your practice. And the word, I think he mentions that because of the original Sanskrit word, when it's translated to English, it doesn't capture all the meanings. So you see some book it translated like right view, some translated like right understanding. But I think if you look, another area we study is about the mind-only school. Go back and review that. It talks about the layers of consciousness. So at the innermost layer is the alaya consciousness, which is the store consciousness. On top of that consciousness is the magna layer, the distortion consciousness. So the right view is because, you know, all of our view is not the view. The word view kind of imply visual, but actually it's any of the inputs from our five senses: eye, ear, nose, tongue, and then mind. You know, all those inputs are distorted by this magna layer, and we don't see things as its true, real, true nature. So when our practice is to be able to poke through that magna layer to see things as they are truly are, and that's what the right view is, without being distorted through eye, through ear, through nose, to, you know, all those six senses. That you know, so we progressively moving up as we practice how to see right view. I think that in that article, Vision and Transformation, they speak about the levels of right view, of understanding as you practice along. My example is that if you are really nearsighted, this is kind of analogy, and you put it a corrective lens. First, you put in like a really light contact lens, your view improve, but you're still not reaching the right thing yet. It's like you improve out, and then you put in a more better corrective lens, and you see a little bit clearer. So that is how the process we practice right view, we get a clearer picture. This picture, but actually hear, sound, you know, all the five, six senses. And at the ultimate level, I think in that article they call the mundane right view and the supramundane right view. So we be able to practice up to the supramundane level. We reach the level where the Heart Sutra is talking about no sight, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch. You know, all those input are basically emptiness. That's the ultimate right view. So because I think this is the third time I'm going through the 4-year course with our local Sangha here. I got the opportunity to review all the material that we study. So each time we revisit that, I'm aware that, oh, there's some details here I totally missed last year. So each time you learn more and learn more, I think that just improved your right view also, John Bang out.
This is Dave bowing in. Craig, I wanted to say thank you so much for that presentation. I really love, actually, I've always enjoyed your style with the way you present and the way you speak. And the cadence piece and the part that was spoken to a little while ago about the pauses, all are very important ways to, I think, keep people's interest. I certainly found your presentation quite interesting, quite engaging. And I did write down a lot of notes and so forth too. I really appreciated that you brought in some kind of non-Buddhist references like the Matrix and the quote from the book, which, as you said, the character, I guess, is a Buddhist character, but still it's not a Buddhist text. So I appreciated that you brought that in. Kind of makes it maybe more accessible to some people and certainly more fun. And I appreciated that, you know, you hit on the Dharma seals and the Dharma doors, and you even brought in, as John pointed out a minute ago, the mind-only teachings, the Yogacara teachings, and in particular, I had appreciated where you were talking about in there that everything happens in the mind, and we tend to have to focus on things one at a time. And our minds create these abstractions and distortions as we do this. And you mentioned, I think, the words that were bound by views through that process. And what I really liked about specifically about that part is that you reminded us that that's part of our everyday lives, that that's something that exists because that's how we live, that's how we get through life. And where it becomes dangerous is when we become very stuck on those views. You know, we make those views very rigid and inflexible. And you kind of brought in the part about how right view is about recognizing that rigidity and recognizing the non-duality between the fixed views versus the how would I say, more open view. Anyway, could ramble a little more about that. The other piece I wanted to throw in is something else that I really enjoy about your style is that you do come in with, how I receive it is that you're very prepared. You have a good sequence with your discussion pieces, your topics, and so forth. My own style actually is more conversational, and that comes from the work that I do. You know, it's working with people in groups quite a bit. I tend to be more kind of conversational and interactive. And I do actually share a lot from personal experiences when I'm talking. I don't know that it's necessarily either one is more right or wrong. But certainly for me, I appreciate the opportunity to kind of learn from you so I can, for myself, can maybe, you know, kind of rebalance and build some skill with more of the more formalized style. And I know it was brought up a minute ago by Maeve about how DTO tends more towards the formalized style, which at times has actually been a little challenging for me because that's not kind of my more natural style. But again, I think it's just each of us showing up in this space to explore, you know, our own strengths and our own challenges and see how it can work with those things. So I think that was the main points. Thank you very much.
And Jeff bowing in. So just noting we're at 20 after the hour. I think myself and perhaps a few other people haven't spoken yet, so we can certainly give a few more minutes for that. I guess I would just ask everyone to kind of keep that in mind because I do want to try to respect everyone's time. And we did start a little late, but I'd like to keep our wrap up close to half past the hour. So with that, Craig, I really appreciated your talk. As I agree with you know, many things said by other people already. I really appreciate the level of kind of research you put into it, the thought, the things you put in, the organization, and all of that. You know, and I think, you know, Dave's comment on being he's more conversational. I think all of us are, whoever we are, and it is good to play to our strengths and certainly your intellectual ability and understanding of the different Buddhist concepts, and you can bring that forward is really wonderful. I do think, you know, maybe you know, you're not going to tell 10 stories from personal experience in the Dharma talk, but yeah, maybe one or two sprinkled in there, I think would benefit the connection with your audience. As far as the level, I think since we're, you know, DTO folks who have been through the 4 years, I think it was about right. It was certainly touched on a lot of elements. It was occasionally, you know, a little mentally challenging to try to keep up. I was thinking it's like a lot of little shots of concentrated orange juice, and you give those pauses. It's time for us to mentally add some water to get it about right internally. So perhaps, you know, to even do a little more pauses because some of the things you share are very deep and profound. And even, one technique that sometimes people do is for a particularly important point, repeat it a couple times, maybe even 3 times, and maybe some of the quotes as well. Some of which I really did love. One, I can't quite find it now. Abiding nowhere, let the mind arise. I really like that, and that will stick with me. And just, reminding us of some of the basics that right view is pragmatically determined. Right view, leads to wholesome actions of body, speech, and mind. So it gives us a way to kind of evaluate, is this view right view? Sometimes we may just know, and other times we may have to kind of think and figure it out a little bit. So anyhow, very much appreciated your talk. Thank you.
Bobby bowing in. Craig, I want to thank you also. I appreciate all the effort you put into that. It was so well organized and well delivered and flawless in that regard. You're doing what you're doing and it's perfect for today. I thought your content was just wonderful. I loved the way you started with wrong view and what it was and why we're often stuck in it. And then ended with right view and even how to determine, as well as we're able, whether or not we're in right view. Your 3 questions of what is it, what just happened, and then what's the correct response. So it's very practical in that way. Rather than go on, I just want to say, I think this was so successful, measured by how it resonates with me and how I'll take it probably for the rest of the week and be able to use what you said to meditate on and apply in my life. So thank you very much.
Oh, this is Sue bowing in. Thank you very much for your presentation. It was very well organized and just was wonderful. And I guess I think what stands out for me the most is that of kindness. And, you just are, that comes out and, is what keeps me coming back, because it's rich with content, but more importantly, it's done with kindness. Thank you. Bowing out.
This is Conrad bowing in, and I will be brief because of time, and also I'll be brief because I don't have much to say. But I am Craig, thank you for being my teacher, and thank you for offering me courage, because I am like you, I'm extremely introverted, and it takes a lot to speak. If it's spontaneous, sometimes no problem. Once I was invited to speak in front of 100 inmates. I was going to facilitate a Sangha, and there was a class on Buddhism, and the professor invited me in. It was spontaneous, and I spoke for an hour and a half, no problem. But if I needed to be scripted, I'd turn into Ralph Cramden. I mean, nothing comes out. And so I really thank you for this courage. And I often remember a Thai once, he was trying to facilitate walking meditation, and he couldn't walk. He was so crowded in. And that's when he came up with the poem of Let the Buddha Walk, let the Buddha speak. And what I've been trying to practice is speaking from my heart. And I've also been, I have a gatha that I recite that I invite the ancestors in. So if ever I offer a Dharma talk and I have imposter syndrome, please excuse me. But I thank you for your guidance and, as like you said, the formality of it, the organization, and you had so many great anchors from which to spring. And, with the inclusion of the stories, you taught me a great deal today, and I appreciate you greatly. Thank you. This is Conrad bowing out.
Janet bowing in. I would like to thank you very much for your presentation. I always look forward to hearing what you have to share. And I like the review, because my mind needs constant review on some of these, like the Dharma seals or the 3 doors of concentration. I don't find that I come across those too often. But when I do, it's like, oh yeah, this could help me in my life to look at aimlessness or signlessness. And so I really appreciated hearing those today. And I like the analogy between dancing gracefully between principle and persona, because I used to dance a lot, and I really like the concept of dancing between these 2 things is like fun for me. And so I really enjoyed hearing that. And of course, the view to suffering, I really, that we do inflict it on ourselves. And that was also a good thought for me to remember when I'm in the state of dukkha, is like, how can I, what caused this, and how can I avoid that in the future, and not clinging and hanging on to some of these things that happen into my life. So I really liked your talk, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Janet. So it is about past. I think everyone has had a chance to share. I just leave the floor open for just 1 minute in case there is some really burning comment that someone would like to share. Okay.
John, just sharing some personal experience that related to right view. When I was in high school, my older brother, he came abroad to the state to study in Houston, Texas. So my classmates know about it, and they asked me, where he went. He said, okay, he go to study in Houston, Texas. And they all asked me the surprise, oh, you want to be a cowboy, huh? And the second one is that, when he was here, we signed up to a program at the University of Houston. They call it a host family program. So an American family would go to the airport, pick him up, house him until the school opens so that he can go to the dorm. So during the time he spent with that family, they got 2 adopted kids, about like 10, 12 years old. And their comment had that, oh, this guy is stupid because he couldn't speak English. So their parents kind of say, no, he didn't speak English well, doesn't mean that he's stupid. So at one of the dinner, so he challenged the kid to say, okay, now open whatever the most difficult chapter in the Bible, and let's memorize. And spend a month to memorize. So the kid pick out one of the chapter. I think he told me that it's in the New Testament. So after 1 month, so they came back to the dinner table, and my brother, because the way the slide was studied back home, we have to memorize a lot. So it's used to him that he can memorize without even understanding a word. So when the challenge times come, he just, another thing is that couple, they have their mom, and their mom has some sort of dislike him being an Asian. So her attitude is not that good with him. And then when the challenge time came, he recites that chapter perfectly. And the boy recited, he's okay, he's missing a few. And then the grandma saw him recite the chapter so perfectly. She said, "Oh God, Jesus is in him." So from that time on, he was treated real nice. Finding out.
Thank you, John. All right. So I'd like to give just one sound of the bell and then we'll have our closing.